In a dramatic turn that has escalated diplomatic tensions across North America, former President Donald Trump, who remains a dominant voice in the Republican Party and a key contender for the 2024 U.S. presidential election, has threatened a full-blown trade war with Canada following its formal recognition of Palestine as an independent state. The development marks a significant geopolitical rupture between two of the world's closest allies and trading partners, casting a long shadow over decades of economic cooperation and political alignment. Trump's response has sparked intense reactions globally, drawing support from conservative factions within the US and Israel, while triggering alarm among diplomats, economists, and human rights organizations alike. The Canadian government, under the leadership of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, made headlines this week by officially recognizing the State of Palestine. The recognition was positioned by Canadian officials as a symbolic and humanitarian move aimed at reinvigorating the stagnant Israeli-Palestinian peace process, reaffirming Canada's long-standing commitment to a two-state solution. Trudeau stated that Canada's recognition does not oppose Israel's right to exist or defend itself, but instead reflects the country's commitment to international law, human rights, and diplomacy. "We cannot continue to ignore the aspirations of the Palestinian people," Trudeau said in a press conference. "Recognition is the first step to peace." However, the move was met with furious backlash from Donald Trump, who has long positioned himself as an unwavering ally of Israel. During his first term, Trump moved the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem and cut aid to Palestinian authorities, decisions that were heavily criticized by international observers but praised by Israeli leadership. In a fiery statement delivered at a rally in Michigan and later reinforced on social media, Trump accused Canada of betraying the Democratic Alliance and siding with terrorists. He further stated that if re-elected, his administration would impose harsh tariffs on Canadian goods, suspend bilateral trade talks, and potentially remove Canada from favored trade status unless the recognition is rescinded. "We will not tolerate betrayal from our northern neighbor," Trump declared. "Canada has chosen to stand with Hamas and Iran over Israel and the United States. There will be consequences, and they will be severe. I built the strongest economy once, and I'll do it again, but not with partners who fund terror and turn their backs on peace." This potential shift in U.S. foreign economic policy has rattled markets and drawn sharp criticism from economists. Canada is the United States' second-largest trading partner after China, with cross-border trade exceeding $800 billion annually. Imposing tariffs or disrupting trade with Canada would have serious implications not just for Canadian exporters, especially in sectors like automotive, agriculture, energy, and technology, but also for U.S. consumers, who could face price hikes and supply shortages. Analysts have warned that a trade war could derail post-pandemic recovery efforts, inflate prices, and increase political polarization. Moreover, critics argue that Trump's stance conflates the act of recognizing Palestine with supporting terrorism, an oversimplification that distorts the complex realities of Middle Eastern geopolitics. The recognition of Palestinian statehood has been undertaken by over 140 countries globally, including many U.S. allies in Europe, Asia, and Latin America. Canada's decision aligns it with a broader international consensus, even if it diverges from Washington's current stance. Yet, Trump's rhetoric appears rooted more in ideological loyalty and domestic political strategy than in nuanced diplomacy. By portraying the move as anti-Israel and anti-American, Trump is consolidating support among evangelical Christians, conservative Jews, and right-wing populists, key constituencies in his base. In Canada, the threat of a trade war has caused political division. Trudeau's Liberal Party has defended the recognition, calling it an ethical necessity and a moral stand. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly emphasized that the recognition was not a rejection of Israel, but an affirmation that peace cannot be achieved if only one side is legitimized. "True peace must be inclusive," she said. "We cannot talk about a viable two-state solution while denying the statehood of one of the parties involved." However, conservative leaders in Canada, including opposition leader Pierre Poilievre, have expressed concern over the economic fallout and accused Trudeau of provoking the United States during an election year. The Israeli government, meanwhile, has praised Trump's stance and condemned Canada's recognition. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called Canada's decision deeply disappointing and warned that it could damage diplomatic relations. No country can claim to support peace while recognizing a state that harbors and glorifies terrorists, Netanyahu said in a statement. The Palestinian Authority, in contrast, welcomed the Canadian recognition and urged other G7 nations to follow suit. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas called it a courageous and principled step that recognizes the legitimate rights of our people. The United Nations and several European Union countries have responded with caution, urging all parties to exercise restraint. The UN Secretary General reminded both the US and Canada of their commitments under international law and the importance of multilateral diplomacy. The European Union has reiterated its support for a two-state solution and has encouraged Canada's move as potentially revitalizing the peace process, while also warning against economic retaliation. Back in the United States, Trump's threat of a trade war is being heavily scrutinized by policy experts and political analysts. Many argue that his proposal would violate key provisions of the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, the successor to NAFTA, which Trump himself signed into law in 2020. Imposing unilateral tariffs on Canadian goods without due cause could trigger retaliatory measures and even international arbitration. Legal scholars suggest that unless national security can be convincingly invoked, a tactic Trump has previously used, such tariffs may be deemed illegal under both U.S. and international trade law. Additionally, Democrats and moderate Republicans have voiced concern over the economic and diplomatic costs of such threats. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer criticized Trump's remarks as reckless and irresponsible, stating that foreign policy cannot be driven by campaign theatrics. Alienating our closest ally over a sovereign diplomatic decision is not leadership, it's demagoguery, Schumer said on the Senate floor. Several Republican lawmakers, while supportive of Israel, have expressed unease about harming economic relations with Canada over an issue that is primarily symbolic and unlikely to shift dynamics on the ground in the Middle East. Political observers note that Trump's reaction fits within a broader pattern of using international crises to galvanize nationalist sentiment and dominate news cycles. By framing the Canadian recognition of Palestine as a betrayal and invoking the language of America First, Trump is attempting to reassert his authority on foreign policy, an area where President Biden has sought to restore multilateralism and rebuild global alliances. Trump's aggressive posturing may energize his base, but it also risks alienating swing voters who value international cooperation and economic stability. Looking forward, the situation remains volatile. If Trump were to follow through on his threats in a potential second term, the repercussions could be significant. Canadian companies might shift focus to European and Asian markets. New tariffs could trigger inflationary pressures in both countries, and diplomatic trust could be severely undermined. The precedent of weaponizing trade over foreign policy disagreements could ripple far beyond North America, setting a dangerous example for future geopolitical disputes.